Caitlin never expected to find herself in space, much less becoming the savior of an alien royalite. All began on a regular Tuesday when Caitlin was hiking in the remote mountains of Colorado. She loved the solitude and the way the crisp air filled her lungs as she climbed higher and higher into the wilderness. Away from the noise of the city, she could finally think clearly. The strange lights in the sky caught her attention. First, Caitlin thought it might be a meteor shower, but the lights moved with purpose and intention. She stood watching as one particularly bright light seemed to grow larger and larger until she realized with shock that it was heading directly toward her location. Caitlin barely had time to dive behind a large boulder before the object crashed into the clearing ahead with a thunderous impact that shook the ground. The dust and debris clouded her vision, but when it cleared, she saw what appeared to be a small spacecraft embedded in the earth. Most people would run away, but Caitlin was never most people. Cautiously, she approached the damaged vessel and noticed a crack in what seemed to be the cockpit. Through the opening, she could see movement and hear a soft rhythmic sound that reminded her of labored breathing using her hiking pole. Caitlin managed to pry the crack wider until it was large enough for her to peer inside. The sight that greeted her was unexpected. An elegant figure with iridescent blue skin and delicate features that seemed almost human yet distinctly alien was trapped beneath a section of collapsed interior. The alien had long silvery hair that seemed to float slightly, despite the gravity, and eyes that glowed with an inner violet light. Without thinking, Caitlin squeezed into the opening and began lifting the debris off the alien figure. The task was difficult, but adrenaline gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. Finally, she managed to free the trapped alien who looked at her with those strange, glowing eyes. What happened next changed Caitlin's life forever. The alien reached out and touched her forehead. A flood of information and images filled Caitlin's mind. She saw vast star fields and magnificent cities floating among the clouds. She saw war and peace and technology beyond human comprehension. And she understood that she had just rescued Zarala, the crown princess of the Luminari Empire, a vast interstellar civilization that humans had no knowledge of. Zarala communicated telepathically, explaining that her ship had been attacked during a diplomatic mission, and she had barely escaped with her life. The attackers were the Viridian Collective, a rival alien faction that sought to overthrow the Luminari royal family and take control of their advanced technology. With her ship damaged beyond repair, Zarala was stranded on Earth, but not for long. Within hours, a rescue beacon had been activated, and a Luminari scout ship arrived cloaked from human detection. The alien crew emerged from their vessel and bowed deeply to both the princess and strangely to Caitlin as well. "To save my life is to bind our fates," Zarala projected into Caitlin's mind. "The ancient laws of my people are clear. You are now my protector, and I am honor bound to you." Before Caitlin could protest, she was escorted along with the princess onto the scout ship. The doors sealed behind them, and the craft lifted silently into the night sky. Caitlin watched through a viewport as Earth grew smaller and smaller, until it was just a blue marble against the blackness of space. She felt a momentary panic at the realization that she was leaving everything behind: her job, her small apartment, her few friends. But then a strange calm washed over her, as if part of her had always known she was meant for something more. The Luminari ship was unlike anything Caitlin could have imagined. The walls seemed to pulse with life, and the corridors shifted and changed as if the vessel itself was a living organism. The crew moved with fluid grace, their blue skin shimmering under the soft ambient lighting. They spoke no words, but Caitlin could sense their communications like whispers at the edge of her consciousness. Zarala led Caitlin to a chamber that seemed to form itself as they entered. A bed, or what Caitlin assumed was a bed, grew from the floor, its surface rippling like water before settling into a solid form. The princess gestured toward it. "You should rest." Zarala's thoughts touched her mind. "The journey to my homeworld will take some time, by your measurement approximately 3 of your Earth days. Your body needs to adjust to our environment. But what about my life on Earth?" Caitlin thought back, surprised at how easily she had adapted to this form of communication. "What about my family, my friends? They will wonder what happened to me." The princess tilted her head, her silver hair floating around her face like a halo. "We have sent a signal that will ensure your absence is not questioned. When we return you to Earth, if that is your wish, it will be as if no time has passed." Caitlin wanted to ask more questions, but exhaustion suddenly overwhelmed her. She sank onto the strange bed which molded itself to her body with perfect comfort. Within moments she was asleep, dreaming of violet eyes and silver hair. She awoke to find Zarala sitting beside her. The princess was studying her with obvious fascination. "You humans are so resilient," Zarala communicated. The ship's physician was concerned that our atmosphere might be harmful to you, but you have adapted remarkably well. Caitlin sat up, noticing for the first time that the air had a sweet taste to it like honey and cinnamon. "How long was I asleep?" she asked. "Nearly a full cycle," Zarala replied, which Caitlin somehow understood to mean about 20 hours. "Come, there is much I wish to show you." The following hours were a blur of wonders. Zarala took her on a tour of the ship, explaining the biotechnology that allowed the Luminari to grow their vessels rather than build them. Caitlin learned that the ship was semi-sentient, responding to the crew's needs and healing itself when damaged. She saw the engine room, where what looked like giant glowing crystals pulsed with energy, and the bridge where officers communicated through a shared mental network. The more time she spent with Zarala, the more Caitlin came to understand the princess was not what she had expected. A royal, yes, but also a scientist and diplomat dedicated to her people's well-being. Despite her ethereal appearance, Zarala possessed a sharp wit and genuine curiosity about humans. On the second day of their journey, alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. Red light pulsed along the corridors, and crew members rushed to their stations. Zarala's face grew tense, her silver hair bristling with static electricity. "They have found us." She projected the thought tinged with fear. The Viridians. Before Caitlin could ask questions, Zarala grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the bridge. There, on a massive view screen, Caitlin saw another ship, a dark, angular vessel that seemed to absorb the light around it. It was pursuing them. Weapons ports open and glowing with ominous energy. The captain of their ship, a tall luminary with elaborate markings on his face, was issuing silent commands. The crew worked in perfect synchronization, their hands dancing over controls that responded to touch and thought. They wished to finish what they started, Zarala explained to Caitlin. "The assassination attempt. The Viridians cannot allow me to return home with the information I have gathered about their new weapon. What can I do to help?" Caitlin thought, surprising herself with her own bravery. Zarala looked at her with those luminous violet eyes. "Nothing. This is not your battle, but I saved you," Caitlin insisted. "Which means, according to your laws, that I am your protector. So let me protect." The princess seemed taken aback, but then a small smile curved her delicate lips. "Very well," she conceded. "There is something perhaps your human perspective may see what we cannot." She led Caitlin to a console where a three-dimensional map of the surrounding space was displayed. The Viridian ship was closing fast its trajectory, locked onto their position. Caitlin studied the map, noticing a dense asteroid field not far from their location. "Can we go through there?" she asked, pointing to the asteroids. The captain shook his head. "The field is too dense, even for our ship," he projected, his thoughts now including Caitlin in the communication. "But what if we just made them think we were going there?" Caitlin suggested. "What if we sent something ahead that looked like your ship, a decoy, while we changed course?" The captain and Zarala exchanged glances. "A probe." Zarala suggested we could modify its signature to match our own. The captain nodded and issued silent commands. Within minutes, a small probe was launched toward the asteroid field, its energy signature altered to mimic the larger ship. As expected, the Viridian vessel adjusted course to follow while the Luminari ship veered sharply away, activating some kind of cloaking technology that made them nearly invisible. The tactic worked. The Viridian ship pursued the decoy, deep into the asteroid field where its larger size became a disadvantage. They watched on the view screen as the enemy vessel struggled to navigate the dense cluster of space rocks, taking damage with each collision. "We have gained time, but they will realize the deception soon enough," the captain warned. We must reach luminary space before they can regroup. Zarala turned to Caitlin, her expression one of newfound respect. You have given us a chance, she communicated. My father will be most interested to meet the human who has twice saved his daughter. Caitlin felt a flutter of anxiety at the mention of meeting alien royalty, but also a surge of pride. She had made a difference here, in this strange new reality so far from home. Perhaps this was where she truly belonged as the ship accelerated toward luminary space. Caitlin gazed out at the stars, wondering what other adventures awaited her in this vast universe that had suddenly opened up before her. The luminary homeworld came into view on the third day of their journey. Caitlin gasped at the sight of it. A vast planet with swirling oceans that glowed with bioluminescence, and continents covered in what appeared to be crystal forests and living cities. Even from orbit she could see that this world was unlike anything on Earth. The entire planet seemed to pulse with life. Our home, Zarala communicated with pride, evident in her mental voice. Luminara, the jewel of the seventh spiral, the ship, began its descent through the atmosphere which shimmered with rainbow hues. As they broke through the cloud layer, Caitlin could see the capital city, a sprawling metropolis of organic architecture. Buildings that looked like they had been grown, rather than built, rose in graceful spirals and arches, connected by bridges that appeared to be made of light. The royal palace was instantly recognizable, a massive floating structure hovering above the city, its crystalline towers catching the light of the system's twin suns and refracting it in dazzling patterns. The ship docked at a special port that extended from the palace, adjusting its biology to create a perfect seal. Zarala turned to Caitlin, who was trying to hide her nervousness. The princess had provided her with luminary clothing, a flowing garment that seemed to be made of liquid silver. It adjusted to her human form, enhancing her appearance while remaining incredibly comfortable. My father will receive us immediately. Zarala projected, you saved the heir to the throne. He will want to honor you. She hesitated, then added, but be prepared. Human concepts are foreign to him, and he may not understand your perspective. Caitlin nodded, trying to calm her racing heart. She was about to meet an alien king as the savior of his daughter. How had her life taken such an extraordinary turn? They were escorted from the ship by a procession of guards, their armor appearing to be part of their bodies, rather than separate pieces. The corridors of the palace were alive with light and movement, the walls shifting in subtle patterns that somehow conveyed emotions rather than words. Caitlin could feel the building's curiosity about her, the human visitor. The throne room took her breath away. The ceiling opened to the sky above while the floor was transparent, revealing the city beneath them. It was as if they were suspended in mid-air between heaven and earth. Two massive thrones dominated the center of the room, one occupied by a regal, luminary male, his blue skin darker than Zarala's and covered in intricate patterns that glowed with inner light. His silver hair was longer and bound with what looked like living metal. His eyes were the same violet as his daughter's, but deeper. More ancient, the second throne held a female luminary of breathtaking beauty. Her skin a lighter blue than the king's, her hair white, rather than silver, and her eyes a paler violet. Zarala approached the thrones and made a complex gesture with her hands. The king rose and stepped forward, his movements fluid and graceful. He placed his hands on his daughter's shoulders and touched his forehead to hers. An exchange of thoughts passed between them that Caitlin could not hear. Then the king turned, his gaze on Caitlin. She felt the weight of his attention like a physical pressure against her mind. So this is the human who saved my daughter, the king projected his thoughts, powerful enough that Caitlin staggered slightly. Small, fragile, yet brave, beyond measure. Caitlin bowed awkwardly, unsure of the proper protocol. I only did what anyone would do. Your Majesty, she thought back. The queen rose now and approached, her silvery robes flowing around her as if they were made of smoke and starlight. Not anyone, she corrected. Many would have fled from the unknown. You chose to help at risk to yourself. Such courage is rare in any species. The king made a gesture and the entire court fell silent. I declare this human, Caitlin of Earth, to be luminary. Friend, a sacred title not bestowed in 10 generations. She is to be honored as one who has preserved the royal line, and with it the future of our people. A murmur of astonishment rippled through the assembled courtiers. Zarala's eyes widened in surprise. "Father," she began, but the king silenced her with a look. "The human will be given quarters in the royal wing." The king continued, "She will be taught our ways, and in return will teach us of Earth. She will attend council meetings as we address the Viridian threat. Her perspective may prove valuable." With that declaration, the formal audience was concluded. Zarala led Caitlin away from the throne room, through corridors that seemed to sing with light. They entered a section of the palace that Caitlin somehow knew was reserved for the most honored guests. "Did you understand what just happened?" Zarala asked, her voice unusually subdued in Caitlin's mind. Caitlin shook her head. "Not really," she admitted. "I gathered it was important." Though, Zarala stopped walking and turned to face her. "Luminary friend is more than a title, it is a sacred bond. My father has essentially adopted you into our family. No human has ever been given such an honor. You are now under royal protection and subject to royal expectations." Caitlin felt dizzy at the implications. "What expectations?" "You will learn our ways, attend our councils, share your human perspective," Zarala explained, and she hesitated. "When the time comes, you will stand with us against the Viridians." The quarters assigned to Caitlin were beyond luxurious. A suite of rooms that responded to her thoughts, changing color and configuration based on her mood. A balcony overlooked the crystal forests beyond the city, their structures catching the light and reflecting it, in patterns that seemed to communicate emotions rather than words. That night, unable to sleep, Caitlin stood on the balcony watching the 3 moons of Luminara rise above the horizon. Their light turned the crystal forests into a sea of multicolored fire. The beauty was almost painful to behold, so different from Earth, yet somehow familiar in its capacity to inspire awe. She sensed, rather than heard, someone approach and turned to find Zarala standing in the doorway. The princess had changed from her formal attire into simpler robes that seemed to be made of woven moonlight. "You cannot sleep?" the princess observed. Caitlin shook her head. "Too many new experiences," she replied. "Too much to process." Zarala joined her at the balcony rail. "I remember feeling the same way after my first diplomatic mission to other worlds," she confessed. "The vastness of it all. The realization that the universe is so much larger and stranger than we can imagine." They stood in companionable silence for a while before Zarala spoke again. "There is something you should know." She communicated, her mental voice serious. "The Viridians will not stop hunting me. The information I carry is too dangerous to them." "What information?" Caitlin asked. The princess turned to face her, violet eyes glowing in the moonlight. "They have created a weapon that can destroy not just worlds but entire star systems. A device that creates artificial black holes capable of consuming everything in their path. With such a weapon they could hold the entire galaxy hostage. I discovered proof of this weapon's existence during my diplomatic mission. That is why they tried to kill me. That is why they still hunt me." Caitlin felt cold, despite the warm night air. Such a weapon. It was like something from a science fiction movie, except this was real. The implications were terrifying. "Tomorrow I present my findings to the High Council," Zarala continued. "You will attend as Luminary friend. Your presence is required." She hesitated, then added, "I would value your perspective. Your human viewpoint may see solutions where we cannot." The next morning, Caitlin was provided with new attire, a formal robe that seemed to be made of living metal, adjusting to her body temperature and movements with perfect precision. Zarala arrived to escort her to the council chambers located in a secure section of the palace. The High Council consisted of 12 Luminary elders in addition to the king and queen. They sat in a circular arrangement around a holographic display that currently showed what appeared to be star maps. When Caitlin and Zarala entered, all eyes turned to them, some curious, others clearly skeptical. The princess presented her findings with clarity and precision. The holographic display changed to show detailed schematics of the Viridian weapon obtained through means Zarala did not specify. The council members exchanged troubled glances as the full implications became clear. Our intelligence suggests they have constructed 3 such devices. The princess concluded. 2 are deployed at strategic locations while the 3rd remains mobile. A demonstration is planned within 30 cycles to prove their capabilities to potential allies. And what do you propose we do? One of the elders asked, his mental voice sharp with challenge. We cannot attack without risking activation of these weapons. That is where we require new thinking, Zarala replied. She turned to Caitlin. Humans have faced existential threats before, though not on this scale. What would Earth do in such a situation? All eyes turned to Caitlin, who felt a moment of panic. These were advanced aliens looking to her for solutions. What could she possibly offer? But then she remembered her history lessons, the Cold War, the concept of mutually assured destruction, and how humans had navigated those dangerous waters. In our history, she began cautiously, when 2 powers both possessed weapons that could destroy each other, they reached a stalemate. Neither side could use their weapons without ensuring their own destruction. We called it deterrence, but we have no comparable weapon, one council member objected. The plan to spread knowledge of the Viridian weapon was set in motion with remarkable speed. The Luminary communication network extended across the galaxy, linking their ambassadors and representatives on hundreds of worlds. Encrypted messages were prepared containing evidence of the Viridian threat, including the schematics Zarala had obtained. Caitlin spent the next several days learning more about Luminary culture Zarala had assigned her. A tutor, a scholarly Luminary named Alara, whose task was to teach her their language, history, and customs. While the telepathic communication was effective, Caitlin wanted to understand the subtle nuances of their society. Alara was patient, explaining how the Luminary had evolved from aquatic ancestors, how their civilization had developed biotechnology instead of mechanical technology, and how their society valued harmony above all else. The Luminary believed that all things are connected, Ilara explained as they walked through the living gardens of the palace gardens, where plants responded to emotional states and bloomed or changed color based on the feelings of those nearby. Our technology, our art, our social structures all reflect this fundamental principle. Caitlin found it fascinating, especially when contrasted with human development. We took a different path, she observed. Separation rather than connection. Individual achievement over collective harmony. Perhaps that is why your perspective is so valuable to us, Ilara suggested. Your people think differently, see patterns we might miss because our minds are trained to seek harmony, while yours are trained to identify discord. In the evenings, Caitlin often found herself in Zarala's private chambers. The princess was eager to learn about Earth, asking endless questions about human customs, art, music, and history. Caitlin did her best to explain everything from democracy to rock and roll, often using the palace's holographic systems to show images of Earth. I wish I could visit your world, Zarala said one evening as they watched a sunset over the Grand Canyon. The colors are different, but the beauty is universal. Maybe someday. Caitlin suggested you could wear a disguise. Your people are humanoid enough that with the right clothing and maybe some skin color adjustment you could pass for human. The princess laughed, a sound like wind chimes. I would like that, she agreed. To walk among humans, to experience your world as you experience it, not just as a diplomatic visitor. Their growing friendship was interrupted when an urgent summons came from the king. The Viridians had discovered their plan. A luminary diplomatic vessel had been destroyed while attempting to deliver the warning to the Cephe system. All hands were lost. Zarala was devastated. I knew the ambassador personally. She confessed to Caitlin, her mental voice thick with grief. Ambassador Nylara was my mentor when I was younger. She taught me the principles of interspecies diplomacy. So sorry, Caitlin offered, wishing she could do more to comfort the princess. The king called an emergency session of the High Council. The holographic display in the center of the chamber showed a map of the galaxy with red markers indicating where Luminary communications had been intercepted or blocked by Viridian forces. They moved faster than we anticipated. One council member noted, they must have spies within our network. or they detected our communications. Another suggested our encryption may have been compromised. The king turned to Caitlin. What would humans do in this situation, he asked. His mental voice was controlled, but she could sense the strain beneath it. Caitlin studied the map, thinking of Earth history and warfare. If we can't be subtle, she suggested then, perhaps we should be bold instead of trying to secretly spread the information. What if we broadcast it openly? A message so public and widespread that it couldn't be stopped or contained. Madness, one elder objected. The Viridians would retaliate immediately. They will retaliate regardless. Zarala countered, supporting Caitlin's suggestion. At least this way the galaxy will know the truth before they strike. After much debate, a new plan was formed. The Luminari would use their most powerful transmission array to broadcast a message to all spacefaring civilizations simultaneously. The message would include proof of the Viridian weapon and a call for a galactic council to address the threat. The broadcast was scheduled. For the following day, Caitlin helped Zarala prepare the message, working to frame it in terms that would resonate with diverse species. This was diplomacy on a scale humans had never attempted, and Caitlin felt both honored and terrified to be part of it. The night before the broadcast, Caitlin couldn't sleep. Restless, she wandered the corridors of the palace, eventually finding herself in an observatory tower. The ceiling was transparent, allowing an unobstructed view of the night sky. The stars looked different from Luminara, unfamiliar constellations in an alien sky. Yet they were still stars governed by the same laws of physics that applied throughout the universe. She sensed someone enter the observatory and turned to find not Zarala, but the Queen. The luminary monarch moved with otherworldly grace, her white hair floating around her as if she were underwater. Her pale violet eyes seemed to see through Caitlin to her very soul. You are troubled, the Queen observed. Caitlin nodded. I'm afraid, she admitted, this plan could start a war. A galactic war. The Queen moved to stand beside her, looking up at the stars. War is already upon us, she replied. Her mental voice was melodious, yet sad. The Viridians chose this path when they created their weapon. What we do now may determine whether it is a short conflict or a long one, whether few die or many. You seem so certain, Caitlin said. The Queen turned to her with a gentle smile. I have lived many of your human lifetimes, she explained. I have seen conflicts begin and end. I have witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. Throughout it all, I have learned one truth. Violence begins when communication fails. When beings cannot or will not understand each other, war becomes inevitable. But can't we try to understand the Viridians? Caitlin asked. Why they built the weapon. What they truly want. The Queen seemed pleased by the question. That is precisely why you are valuable to us, she projected. You seek understanding even of those who threaten you. The Viridians believe domination is their right. Their history, their biology, their entire culture is built around conquest. They do not seek to understand, only to control. Caitlin considered this, wondering if there were parallels in human history. Conquerors who saw only submission as acceptable. Perhaps some conflicts truly were inevitable when opposing worldviews collided. After a moment of silence, the Queen spoke again. There is something else troubling you, she observed. Something personal, Caitlin sighed. Earth, she admitted, I miss it. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever see it again. My home, my family, my friends. She hadn't allowed herself to dwell on these thoughts, but now they came rushing to the surface. The Queen placed a cool hand on Caitlin's shoulder. The touch was gentle, but Caitlin could feel power thrumming beneath the surface. Home is not always a place, she projected. Sometimes it is where we are needed, where we can make a difference. She paused. You have found such a place here among us, but that does not mean you must abandon your Earth forever. When this conflict is resolved, when peace is secured, you may choose your path. The Queen's words brought comfort, and with it came clarity. Whatever happened tomorrow, Caitlin knew she was where she needed to be. The next morning, the palace was a flurry of activity. Final preparations were made for the broadcast. Zarala would deliver the main message with the king and queen beside her. Caitlin would stand with them, as luminary friend, a symbol of interspecies cooperation. The transmission center was deep within the palace, a vast chamber dominated by a crystalline structure that pulsed with energy. The luminary technicians moved with practiced efficiency, their hands dancing over controls that responded to touch and thought. Zarala looked regal in her formal attire, her silver hair adorned with living metal ornaments that shifted and changed, reflecting her emotions. She appeared calm, but Caitlin could sense her anxiety. "Are you ready?" the princess asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," Caitlin replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. The countdown began. The crystalline structure at the center of the room began to glow, brighter energy building within it. The technicians reported that receivers across the galaxy were being targeted. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Then alarms blared throughout the palace. Red light pulsed along the walls and the floor trembled beneath their feet. "We are under attack," a technician reported. "Viridian warships have entered the system. They're heading directly for the capital." The king turned to his military advisor. "How did they penetrate our defenses?" he demanded. "They used a new technology," the advisor replied, something that masked their approach. "Our sensors didn't detect them until they were already past the outer defenses." Zarala stepped forward. "We must proceed with the broadcast," she insisted, even more urgently now. The king nodded. "Continue," he ordered. The transmission began. Zarala's image projected across the galaxy as she revealed the Viridian threat. She spoke with passion and conviction, her voice reaching thousands of worlds simultaneously. The evidence was presented, including the schematics of the weapon and intelligence reports of its testing. As she spoke, the palace shook with the impact of Viridian weapons. The shields were holding for now, but the attack was intensifying. "We call upon all peaceful civilizations to stand with us," Zarala concluded. "We face not just an attack on the Luminari, but a threat to all life in the galaxy. We must unite, or we will fall divided." The evacuation of the royal palace happened with practiced efficiency. The Luminari had prepared for this possibility, and emergency protocols were immediately activated. Caitlin found herself swept along with Zarala through hidden corridors that seemed to form themselves as they ran. Above them, the battle for Luminara intensified. The palace shields flickered under sustained attack, while Luminari defense forces engaged the Viridian fleet. Explosions lit up the sky like artificial lightning. Caitlin and Zarala reached a secure hangar bay where several small vessels waited. The king and queen were already aboard the primary royal transport, surrounded by guards and essential advisors. "You will come with us," the king commanded as Caitlin and Zarala approached. The luminary friend must be protected. They boarded quickly, the vessel sealing behind them. Unlike the larger ships Caitlin had seen, this one was clearly designed for speed and stealth. Its organic hull was darker, almost black, with none of the luminescent qualities of other luminary technology. "Where are we going?" Caitlin asked as they strapped into acceleration couches. "The sacred refuge," Zarala explained. "It is a hidden world known only to the royal family and their closest advisors, a place prepared for exactly this kind of emergency." The ship's engines powered up with barely a whisper. The hangar bay doors opened, revealing the chaos above the capital city. Viridian warships filled the sky, their angular black hulls a stark contrast to the graceful luminary vessels. "Our defenses are holding, but they won't last forever," the ship's captain reported. "We must break through the Viridian blockade." The king nodded, his expression grim. "Deploy the shadow protocol," he ordered. The captain pressed her hand against a control panel that pulsed with blue light. Immediately, the ship's exterior seemed to absorb all light, becoming a void against the stars. At the same time, 3 identical vessels launched from nearby hangars, decoys, Zarala explained to Caitlin. "They will draw off the Viridian pursuers while we slip away." The tactic worked. The Viridians detected the decoy ships and pursued them, allowing the royal transport to slip through a gap in their blockade. Once clear of the planet's atmosphere, the captain activated the faster-than-light drive. The stars blurred and stretched as the ship accelerated beyond light speed. Caitlin felt a moment of disorientation as the universe seemed to fold around them. Then they were traveling through what appeared to be a tunnel of swirling energy slipstream. Zarla explained when she saw Caitlin's expression of wonder. A dimension adjacent to normal space where the laws of physics allow faster travel. The Viridians have similar technology, but our bioengineered ships can maintain slipstream longer. The journey to the sacred refuge would take several days, according to Zarala. During that time, Caitlin witnessed the grief and determination of the Luminary royal family. The king spent hours in communication with military commanders across Luminary space, coordinating the defense of their worlds. The queen worked with diplomatic corps attempting to rally allied species to their cause. Zarala invited Caitlin to a strategy session in the HFY ship's conference chamber. There, a holographic display showed the current state of the conflict. The news was not encouraging. Several outlying Luminary colonies had already fallen to Viridian attacks. Others were under siege. But there was hope too. The broadcast had achieved its purpose. Many civilizations had responded, pledging support against the Viridian threat. A coalition was forming, one that might be strong enough to stand against the aggressors. During these sessions, Caitlin noticed something interesting about how the Luminary approached warfare. Their strategies emphasized defense and containment rather than offensive strikes. They sought to neutralize the enemy rather than destroy them. It was consistent with their philosophy of harmony. But Caitlin wondered if it would be enough against an enemy as ruthless as the Viridians. On the third day of their journey, Caitlin found Zarala alone in the ship's observation dome. The princess was watching the swirling energies of slipstream, her expression troubled. "You're worried?" Caitlin observed, joining her. Zarala nodded. "My people are dying." She communicated, her mental voice heavy with sorrow. "Worlds that have known only peace for thousands of years now burn because of Viridian aggression. Because of the information I discovered, you can't blame yourself." Caitlin insisted you did what was right. Exposing their weapon was the only way to prevent something even worse. Perhaps, Zarala conceded, but I wonder if there was another way. A path that would not have led to such immediate violence. Caitlin had no answer for that. She too had questioned their decisions, wondering if they had acted too hastily. But dwelling on might have been served no purpose. They had to focus on what lay ahead. "What will happen when we reach this refuge?" Caitlin asked, changing the subject. The princess seemed grateful for the distraction. "The sacred refuge is where we will regroup," she explained. "It contains technology and resources that will help us counter the Viridian threat. Ancient knowledge preserved for generations. Is it a military installation?" "Then not exactly," Zarala replied. "It is a repository of knowledge, but also a sanctuary. The first Luminary colonized it thousands of years ago, before we achieved interstellar travel. It is where our species began its journey to the stars." They were interrupted by an alert from the ship systems. The captain's voice echoed through the vessel. "We are being pursued," she announced. "Viridian warships have somehow tracked us through slipstream." The king immediately called for battle stations. The royal transport was not designed for combat, but it had defensive capabilities. The crew rushed to their positions while guards took up protective stances around the royal family. "How did they find us?" Zarala wondered aloud. "They shouldn't have been able to track us through slipstream unless what Caitlin prompted when the princess fell silent, unless there is a traitor among us." Zarala finished her thought. "Someone who transmitted our position." The accusation sent a ripple of shock through those who heard it. The Luminary prided themselves on their loyalty, especially to the royal family. The idea of betrayal was almost unthinkable. Yet how else could the Viridians have found them? The captain reported that 3 Viridian pursuit vessels were closing fast. They would intercept before the royal transport could reach the sacred refuge. The king ordered evasive maneuvers, but options were limited. In slipstream, where course changes could destabilize the dimensional passage. "We have one option," the captain suggested. "We can exit slipstream early and use a gravity slingshot around the nearest star system to change our trajectory. Then re-enter slipstream on a new course." The maneuver was risky. The star system in question was uncharted territory, possibly hostile, but staying on their current course meant certain interception by the Viridian warships. The king approved the plan. Prepare for turbulence, the captain warned as she initiated the exit sequence. The transition back to normal space was jarring. The swirling energies of slipstream collapsed around them, and suddenly they were in real space again. A binary star system loomed ahead, its twin suns blazing against the blackness of space. The captain directed the ship toward the larger of the two stars, intending to use its gravitational field to accelerate and change their direction. The Viridian pursuit ships emerged from slipstream, moments later immediately firing their weapons. The first volley struck the Royal Transport's shields, which flared bright blue with absorbed energy. The ship shuddered under the impact but held course. The captain pushed the engines to maximum as they approached the star. The heat shields activated, protecting them from the stellar radiation. Caitlin gripped her seat as the ship began its slingshot maneuver. The gravitational forces were intense, pressing her back against the cushions. The view screen showed the massive star filling their view. Its surface a churning sea of plasma and magnetic storms. The Viridians continued their pursuit, firing whenever they had a clear shot. Their ships were faster in normal space, narrowing the gap between them. The Royal Transport's shields were weakening with each hit. "We're not going to make it," Caitlin thought, as warning indicators flashed across control panels. Then Zarala stood up and approached the navigation console. "I have an idea," she projected to the captain and the king. "There's another way." She placed her hands on the console, which responded to her touch, changing the display to show a different trajectory. Instead of completing the slingshot maneuver, Zarala proposed diving closer to the star using one of its massive solar flares as cover. "It's too dangerous," the captain objected. "We would be exposed to lethal levels of radiation. Even with our shields, our biotech can adapt." Zarala insisted. "The ship can protect us. The Viridians use mechanical technology. Their shields cannot adjust as quickly as ours." The king considered the plan, then nodded. "Do it," he ordered. The ship altered course, plunging toward a massive solar prominence that arced thousands of kilometers from the star's surface. The hull began to glow as the temperature rose. The ship's biological systems responded, channeling energy and adjusting their molecular structure to withstand the extreme conditions. The Viridians hesitated, clearly surprised by the maneuver. Two of their ships broke off pursuit, unwilling to risk the dangerous approach, but the lead vessel continued closing the distance, its weapons still firing. The sacred refuge exceeded all of Caitlin's expectations. The complex was built into the side of a mountain, its structures seeming to grow from the natural rock like massive crystalline flowers. The buildings were connected by bridges that appeared to be made of solidified light, and the entire facility hummed with energy that Caitlin could feel vibrating through her bones. Inside the complex was even more impressive. Vast chambers opened up within the mountain, their walls lined with living technology that pulsed with inner light. Gardens grew in central atriums nourished by artificial sunlight. Plants unlike any Caitlin had seen on Earth or Luminara twisted toward the light, their spiral patterns creating hypnotic designs. The royal family was escorted to a central chamber where representatives from other luminary worlds were already gathered. Having escaped the initial Viridian attacks, they had made their way to the sacred refuge, following contingency plans established long ago. These leaders greeted the king and queen with profound relief. Caitlin watched as information was exchanged and status reports given. The news continued to be grim. Many luminary worlds were under siege. Several had fallen to Viridian occupation. The combined Viridian fleet outnumbered luminary defenses, and their weapon, the black hole generator, remained a devastating threat, but there was hope too. The coalition of species responding to the luminary broadcast was growing. Species that had long been neutral in galactic politics were now taking sides against the Viridian threat. A resistance was forming. Caitlin was introduced to the assembled leaders as luminary friend. Some viewed her with curiosity, others with skepticism. A few seemed openly hostile to her presence. The concept of a human having such status was clearly controversial. "She doesn't belong here," one elder stated, his mental voice sharp in Caitlin's mind. "This is not her war." Zarala stepped forward to defend her. "She saved My life, she reminded them, according to our most sacred laws, that makes her one of us, and her perspective has already proven valuable. She was instrumental in our plan to expose the Viridian weapon. The king raised his hand, silencing further debate. The human stays, he declared. His authority was absolute and none dared challenge him directly. But Caitlin could sense the lingering resentment from some of the assembly. After the initial briefings, Zarala led Caitlin deeper into the complex, down passageways that seemed to have been grown rather than built. They descended for what felt like kilometers until they reached a massive door that pulsed with blue light. The heart of the refuge, Zarala explained as the door recognized her and opened. Our most sacred technology and knowledge are preserved here. The chamber beyond was vast, its ceiling lost in shadows. Its center was dominated by a structure that resembled a massive tree made of crystalline material. Its branches reached toward the ceiling while its roots disappeared into the floor. The entire structure glowed with inner light, pulsing in a rhythm that reminded Caitlin of a heartbeat. This is the luminary ancestral memory, Zarala communicated with reverence. It contains the collective knowledge of our species stretching back thousands of generations. Every scientific discovery, every philosophical insight, every historical event, all preserved within its living matrix. Caitlin approached the structure in awe. It's alive, she asked. In a sense, Zarala confirmed. It is a hybrid entity, part biological, part technological. Its consciousness is vast but alien even to us. It does not think as we do, but it remembers everything. Why have you brought me here? Caitlin wondered. Because it may hold the key to defeating the Viridians, Zarala replied. Our scientists believe that somewhere in the ancestral memory lies the knowledge to counter the black hole weapon. But accessing specific information from the memory is difficult. It requires a mind attuned to the right frequencies, a mind that can ask the right questions. And you think I can help with that? Zarala nodded. Your human perspective sees patterns we might miss, asks questions we would not think to ask. The memory responds to novel inquiries. Our scientists have been searching for weeks without success. Perhaps you will have better luck. Caitlin felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. The fate of not just the Luminari, but potentially many species throughout the galaxy might depend on her ability to interact with this alien consciousness. What do I do? She asked. Zarala guided her to a platform at the base of the crystal tree. Place your hands on the interface, she instructed, pointing to a surface that rippled like water. Open your mind to its presence. Ask your questions, but be specific. The memory contains too much information to process. Without focus. Caitlin took a deep breath and placed her hands on the interface. The surface felt cool, at first then warm, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. She felt a presence brush against her consciousness, vast and ancient. It didn't communicate in words or images, but in concepts that unfurled in her mind like blooming flowers. She thought of the Viridian weapon, focusing on its fundamental principles, the creation of artificial singularities, the manipulation of space-time. The memory responded, showing her civilizations long extinct that had experimented with similar technologies. Their successes, their failures, their ultimate destruction as they lost control of forces they barely understood. Carefully, Caitlin directed her thoughts toward countermeasures, ways to neutralize or defend against such weapons. The memory showed her theoretical models, mathematical equations beyond her comprehension. She saw devices that could stabilize space-time, preventing the formation of singularities. Others that could redirect gravitational forces. It's too much, she thought, overwhelmed by the flood of information. I don't understand enough of the science to know what's useful. She felt Zarala's presence join her in the mental link. The princess's mind helped filter and organize the information, providing context where Caitlin lacked knowledge. Together, they searched through the ancient memories, seeking anything that might help against the Viridian threat. Hours passed as they communicated with the memory. Caitlin lost track of time, her consciousness expanding as she accessed more of the vast repository. Finally, they found something promising. A record from an ancient conflict where a species called the Etheri had developed technology to counter gravitational weapons. The memory showed them schematics for a device that generated a field of opposing energy neutralizing the effect of artificial singularities. The principles were complex, but Zarala believed luminary scientists could adapt the technology. When they finally withdrew from the interface, Caitlin staggered, feeling drained but triumphant. Zarala steadied her, a look of excitement on her delicate features. "You did it," she projected, her mental voice vibrant with hope. "We found what we needed." They brought their discovery to the gathered leaders and scientists. Holographic displays showed the adapted schematics as luminary engineers began working immediately to build prototype devices. If successful, they could be deployed to defend key worlds and eventually mount a counteroffensive against the Viridians. But time was running short. Intelligence reports indicated that the Viridians were preparing to use their black hole weapon against a major luminary world as a demonstration of power. They needed to act quickly. A plan formed. The coalition forces would launch a diversionary attack, drawing Viridian defenses away from their weapon platforms. Meanwhile, a small strike team would deploy the countermeasure device directly at the primary weapon. The mission would be extremely dangerous with little chance of survival, and, if successful, it would neutralize the Viridians' greatest advantage. To Caitlin's surprise, Zarala volunteered to lead the strike team. "I discovered the weapon," she argued. "I should be part of neutralizing it." The king objected immediately. "You are the heir to the throne," he reminded her. "The future of our people." But Zarala was adamant. "I have the most experience with Viridian technology," she insisted, "and I can pilot the stealth vessel better than anyone." She turned to Caitlin. "Will you come with me?" she asked. "Your adaptive thinking may be crucial if we encounter unexpected obstacles." Caitlin hesitated. The mission was essentially a suicide run, but she had come too far to back away now. These people had become her friends. Their cause was just, and the alternative was unthinkable. If the Viridians succeeded, countless billions would die. "I'll go with you," she agreed. The preparations moved quickly. The countermeasure device was constructed and tested using simulations. A small biotech vessel was modified for stealth capabilities. Caitlin and Zarala trained together with 4 elite luminary operatives who would accompany them. The plan was refined and contingencies established. The night before the mission, Caitlin stood on a balcony overlooking the alien landscape of the sacred refuge. The unfamiliar stars above reminded her of how far she was from Earth. How strange that her hiking trip had led her here, to the brink of an interstellar war. She sensed Zarala approach and turned to greet her. The princess looked solemn, her silver hair gleaming in the moonlight. "Are you afraid?" Zarala asked. Caitlin nodded honestly. "Terrified," she admitted, "but also determined. That makes 2 of us," Zarala confessed. "I have never led a combat mission before. My training was in diplomacy, not warfare." "You'll do fine," Caitlin assured her. "You've shown more courage than anyone I know." Zarala smiled at the compliment. "When this is over, if we survive," the princess began, then hesitated. "What will you do? Will you return to Earth?"